worst prospect team fit, because we already kind of talked about this one a little bit, so I just sort of, not to like get it out of the way, but I'll just repeat it here. Tyleik Williams, if there's a place that Tyleik Williams is going to go in the first round, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Or even if it's somewhere in the second round, the Chiefs have the ability to, they say like, all right, well, we got to take an offensive tackle at the back end of the first round. If they have the opportunity to maybe trade up a couple of spots, get themselves a Tyleik Williams, that's perfect for them, right? He fits exactly what their mantra is along the defensive line of being run defense first, being very strong on the line of scrimmage, and he also frees up Chris Jones to be able to get a lot more one-on-one opportunities, or at least as many as a guy like Chris Jones would possibly get, standing next to a guy like George Karlaftis as well along that defensive line. You throw in Leo Chanel as well. Man, that is a powerful defensive line that you were talking about there in Kansas City. So they're moving on for Tershawn Wharton. They need to replace him there. A couple of guys on that defensive line no longer there. I think Tyleik Williams would be a perfect fit, because you don't need him to be anything that he's not. You don't have to draft Tyleik Williams and say, well, we really need him to develop into a pass rusher here. No, you don't. Just have him do exactly what he did at Ohio State this past year. And the Chiefs' defensive line gets to play pretty well, like a well-oiled machine. So I love that fit for them there. Back into the first round is really where I could see Tyleik's range starting, but I would love it if they could go offensive tackle somehow in the first round and then maybe even trade up somewhere to be able to get Tyleik. And if you can come away with a potential starting offensive tackle and Tyleik Williams, that'd be a good 1-2 draft there for the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you think about that one? And then we can go on to whoever you want to talk about first with a good team prospect pairing fit.
It's a great call. I think an early down run stopper like that is somebody who'd really help them. And I like that you mentioned Leo Chanel, because when they drafted him, it was at linebacker, but it was with the same idea of, I believe Chanel, when he was drafted, was the highest graded run defense linebacker in the country as last year at Wisconsin. The Chiefs are always looking for guys in those specialized roles, and if they feel like Tyleik is the early down guy that they need to put next to Chris Jones, I think that is a fantastic move. I'm going to go back to the rival in Michigan. You mentioned before with Mason Graham the floor being at 12 or maybe even 11 to the 49ers. Personally, I think the floor should be at number 5 with Jacksonville. If the only reason...
The floor?
Yeah, I think...
The floor?
Yeah, I think the only reason for me that he should get by Jacksonville is if Travis Hunter's on the board. Otherwise, I think Mason Graham is such an obvious fit for the Jaguars to go next to Eric Armstead, to go inside of Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker. I think the floor, if Travis Hunter's not on the board, I don't think he should get by Jacksonville at 5. They were 28th in overall defensive tackle grade last year, 20th in run defense grade, the second worst pass rush grade from their defensive tackles last year. Look, Mason Graham, he's the full package. He's the complement that they need to fill in their defensive line. I don't know if James Gladstone, this is obviously high praise, I'm not saying anything crazy here, but he knows what say an Aaron Donald type of impact guy can have on the inside. He saw it all those years with the Rams, right? I just think I don't think if I'm Jacksonville, Travis Hunter is not on the board and Mason Graham is, that's where I'm going. I wouldn't even have any second question about it. That's exactly where I'm going. Fill out the front 7. You've then got a really stacked defensive line. You got a good pair of linebackers in Lloyd and Aluakon. We're still working on the secondary. I think that front 7 could be scary if they add Mason Graham to it.
I don't know about the floor. I'm still trying to get over you saying the floor is number 5, but I do respect
for
it.
me. For me, the floor would be if I'm Jacksonville and Mason Graham's on the board. That's this.
What's the ceiling? If that's the floor, where's the range begin? Cleveland at 2?
They won't do it, but I would actually consider him at 2 for Cleveland. Why not? They need an inside guy like that too.
Actually,
I would think about it.
The Giants have interior defensive line needs. They won't do this. They will not do this.
No,
but Dexter Lawrence and Mason Graham would be.
The Giants, I've told you this. I'm putting money. I would put money on it. They're taking a quarterback. I don't know how
you can't.
This
is America.
That's true. I certainly could do that. But no, I think. Look, would I at least consider Graham at 2 to the Browns? Yeah, I think they need a player like that. Would I consider it if the Giants ever had a quarterback? I'd absolutely consider Graham next to Dexter Lawrence. I mean, we just talked about complimentary with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Mason Graham and Dexter Lawrence would be perfect. But they don't have. But they don't have a quarterback. Absolutely. So again. I think it's very likely he falls to 5. I don't think New England, after signing Milton Williams, would do it, having him and Barmore already there.
No.
I don't, unless Travis Hunter's on the board. That's the one thing I would consider for Jacksonville. If Travis Hunter's there, go ahead. Otherwise, just take Mason Graham. Just run the card in. It's another one. Don't waste the 10 minutes for us. We got shows to do. We got stuff to do. Take Mason Graham. Let us get on to the next pick.
I love the confidence in Mason Graham. I really do. Okay, the next, I'll stick with the Michigan guys. I'll stick with Kenneth Grant. To me, the best potential fit for Kenneth Grant is truly the Los Angeles Chargers. It is. You get a coach who knows him extremely well. I know this is sort of like a dub, but they just lost Puna Ford, right? I mean, like, they actually need this. This is not just let's give Kenneth Grant to his old coach and Jim Harbaugh. They didn't resign Puna Ford. They don't have Puna Ford anymore. They desperately now need this type of a player, right? Especially with you getting rid of Joey Bosa as well. Now, you could say, all right, well, that was an addition by subtraction, but Joey Bosa at least probably could have been a good run defender for you this year if he was fully healthy. He's been through injuries, and he wasn't worth the cap space that they were going to allocate to him, so there's no doubt about that. But they need to get better defending the run. They cannot let the interior of their defensive line take a major step back, and Kenneth Grant allows them to stay stout on the interior defensive line. So this is genuine. Like, the range in where Kenneth Grant could get picked. Somebody said Kenneth Walker in the chat earlier, messing them up, and now I'm messed up. The range in which he could get picked, but also the scheme, I think, is absolutely perfect. It's Jesse Minter as well, the defensive coordinator that was with Jim Harbaugh when they were both at Michigan. They know this player so well. They recruited this player to get to Michigan, and they implemented him in the starting lineup very early in his career. So to me, him taking his first step in the pros, Los Angeles Chargers uniform in this scheme, perfect. It really is perfect. I've talked about a couple of different spots for him as well, not just the Chargers, but there are a handful of other spots that I think could make a lot of sense for him. I think that Cincinnati can make a ton of sense. I think the Arizona Cardinals could make a lot of sense. Potentially Atlanta, although they'll probably let some of their young guys develop there and sort of see what they've got. But Buffalo is where I feel like Kenneth Grant's floor is at pick number 30, but that's the range for him. I still believe that perfect spot is for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Back with his old head coach, you mentioned it, gift from the football gods, right? I think Jim Harbaugh, well, he already loves him. He already knows what he can do at Michigan, right? So I think Harbaugh would love to have him, and I think, as you mentioned, the direct replacement to Puna Ford, that's perfect. Kenneth Grant is that same exact type of player who, again, maybe doesn't flash in the traditional stat sheet, but between the run defense grades and his ability to make his teammates better in run defense, I think Harbaugh would love to have him back again.
All right, who's next for you?
So I know the Minnesota Vikings are a prime trade down candidate at 24 with only 4 draft picks, but if they stay, I think I would highly consider, Kenneth Grant would be an option if he was there, but I would highly consider a run defense leaning defensive tackle. They signed Jonathan Allen, who's had one of the lowest run defense grades in the league in each of the past 2 years. Javon Hargrave has struggled in run defense for the past several years. I think this is a spot where Walter Nolen would fit in as an early down complement to those two guys, because to me, I don't want Hargrave and Allen on the field at the same time unless it's an obvious passing situation. They're still lacking in run defense, and I know Brian Flores is not going to want to get run between the tackles on him in that defense. He wants to get in those obvious passing situations, stop the run on early downs, get into all the blitz packages on late downs. I think Walter Nolen, for what he is right now, improves the Vikings' run defense right now. Then you're talking about, okay, you can hold him out of some of those obvious passing situations because we're still trying to win games here. You can have Hargrave and Allen out there, and then you could develop him rotationally in that way, and you can give him time to become that two-way player that you need him to learn under Allen, learn under Hargrave, learn how to rush the passer, right? I think Walter Nolen in Minnesota, if they stay at 24, would be a fantastic pick because to me, they don't have an elite run-stopping defensive tackle now. They have 2 great veteran pass rushers. They have a really good group that can rush the passer, and they're very versatile, and obviously Flores can get into the blitzes, but early down run defense is so big for Brian Flores when he wants to get into all the complicated stuff. I think Nolen would help him a lot there in that role, playing alongside Allen and Hargrave on early downs.
It'd make for a nasty defensive line, I think, with the veterans that they have, and then getting Walter Nolen in there. I will be honest, I think the biggest roadblock for this actually happening is the Vikings believing that Walter Nolen is not only worth the 24th overall pick, but worth them trading down instead. Because I think they will have plenty of teams looking to trade either back into the first round or maybe up from the back end of the first round, where we've talked about this so many times before. Right now, the Vikings have 4 picks in this draft. They have 24, and they don't pick again until 97. They would love to get more picks if they can. I'm sure they are already sort of laying the groundwork for that to be possible. So, honestly, the biggest roadblock isn't anything against the strategy that you're putting. I love what you are saying, but after spending a lot of money on Javon Hargrave and John Allen, would they say to themselves, we have to take Walter Nolen over trading down and getting other draft assets? That's honestly the biggest roadblock, because other than that, I love the fit. I really do.
I agree. I think if they're looking to trade down, the spots to me that they're building depth are defensive tackle, interior offensive line still to build some depth behind it, right? I think somebody behind Aaron Jones, I think they're a team that could dip into this running back class and find someone to complement Aaron Jones. And then I think it's safety is somewhere else. But those are all things that you could find on day two. So I get it. If they get, let's say, three picks in a trade down, let's say several spots, even 15 to 20 spots, right? 2 of them on day 2, maybe a day 3 pick, however you want to do it. I think those are spots where they can add on day 2 and day 3 with the depth of those positions in this draft. But if they were to stay, and I think you mentioned it, that's the biggest impediment to this happening is just them staying at the 24th overall pick. But it takes 2 to tango, and they still have to find that trade and find who's going to be desperate enough for somebody to move up several spots.
Yeah. The last guy that I want to bring to the table is Omar Norman-Lott, and sort of finding the correct home for him here. I have the Dallas Cowboys because I think about Matt Eberflus being the defensive coordinator there now, and how much a really good difference-making 3-technique defensive tackle matters to his scheme. And so I think that Omar Norman-Lott would be good in Dallas, because I think that would be a good fit there. But just from the Eberflus standpoint, but I wonder if I'm backpedaling a little bit on this one, because the more I thought about it, the more it's like, man, they need a run-stuffing defensive tackle. As much as I think that Eberflus really needs a 3-technique guy. Maybe they'll be interested in a little bit later. You know what team I would actually love for them to draft Omar Norman-Lott?
Go on.
Is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know how it happens, but I would love it. You have Cam Hayward there. You already have Keanu Benton there. And now you get to throw in Omar Norman-Lott, and he just gets to rotate in with those two beasts. That would be sick. Now, they don't have that second-round pick. I don't know where Omar Norman-Lott is going to end up going in this draft, just because the lack of volume, the lack of snaps really goes into how you view him as a prospect. Does he slip to the third round? Can the Steelers potentially get him around pick number 83, where they pick in the third round? I don't know. But in terms of where I would love to see him, actually on that Steelers defensive line, I think he could be nasty behind Keanu Benton and Cam Hayward. So I originally had the Cowboys on my list here as a potential pairing with Omar Norman-Lott, but the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, no, they probably draft more of a run-stuffing defensive tackle, even though Eberflus wants that pass-rushing 3-technique. But the Steelers are a team that I think could really prioritize a player like that.
And I think when you're talking about the depth of the Steelers' defensive line and trying to use, let's say you're going to keep Norman-Lott in that rotational role. Well, I don't know if a team, like you mentioned, even though he's talented, is going to take clearly a guy who was a rotational player at Tennessee and very well could be in the NFL. I don't know if they're going to take him in the second, but the fact that the Steelers do that naturally anyway with all the depth that they have, okay, fine, you work in 20 to 25 snaps a game, give us what you give us, and get on out, right? I think you don't have to pressure him on early downs to play in there, because you've got Cam Hayward, you've got Keanu Benton. That is a team that if he were, you're right, if he were to fall to the third round and be added into that rotation, that does make a lot of sense. I'm with you on that.
Last guy, who you got before we get to some gems here?
Last guy for me, I've been looking at just kind of teams that need. I'm looking at TJ Sanders and just teams that need a jolt, right? Teams that use a 4-man front and they need a jolt in their pass rush. And then I was thinking about in the second round, maybe the Las Vegas Raiders. Right? I think, it's just maybe, I don't know if he'll help them enough on early downs. They still have a lot to fix in this defense, especially on the back end. But their defensive tackles were 26th in pass rush grade this past season, and the leader of that group was Christian Wilkins, who graded at a 67. They need that jolt on the interior, right? We talk so much about Max Crosby off the edge or getting Malcolm Kuntz back off the edge this year, but they need somebody to give them that internal pocket push, right, that can really disturb, right? Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Bo Nix in their own division. If you don't have a legitimate pass rush inside and outside in this division, you're not going to get very far, because those are 3 really darn good quarterbacks, as we know. So I think TJ Sanders would fit in the Raiders' defense, would fit in that penetrating 4-man front. I think he could complement Christian Wilkins in the pass rush game pretty well. I think Wilkins could even move into the 1-technique in passing situations, and you've got then a really, really nice pass rush unit. Crosby, Wilkins, Kuntz, and Sanders. I think that would be a dangerous 4-man rush for Pete Carroll to work with.
That would go into what Walt was talking about earlier in the chat on the show, saying, hey, what about Mason Graham at number 6? Obviously, if you're not drafting Mason Graham at number 6, getting a guy like TJ Sanders, aka Bull Rush McIntyre, for those that listen to NFLSC, I think that could be a lot of fun. Got a $10 super chat from Salense. Shout out to Salense for all the super chats he's given us. Norman-Lott has some nutty pass rush statistics. Brett Coleman looked into it, said he has a pass rush productivity rate of 12.9, which is insane. At a bare minimum, he's getting another contract just for that alone. And honestly, I don't disagree with you, right? Because if you can get after the passer, the NFL teams will keep you around. They will absolutely keep you around. Obviously, like run stuffing, being a good run defender raises your floor, but there are a handful of guys that can be good run stuffers that can come in and out of the league. When you can get after the passer the way that Norman-Lott has, especially the way that he did this past season, that's the stuff that doesn't come around very often. So it makes me think that even with the low total volume that he had this year when it came to total snaps, it's hard for me to think that he would get to the third round. Certainly beyond the third round. Like he is a day 2 lock no matter what. I just don't know where he's going between early second round and late third round. I truly don't know. I think the NFL is going to kind of be all over the place with how they view his current career. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.